Cleopatra's death, glamorous or gruesome? Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Hidden History, the channel that explores what the textbook ignores. I'm your host, Andrea Redlin. I am an author, graphic designer in training, a history buff, and an unashamed cat lover who just loves to dive into the gritty details of history. I hope you're comfortable because what I'm about to talk about is far from comfy. Listener discretion is advised. Come with me back in time as we travel 2,000 years ago to ancient Egypt. I want my mummy. Mention Egypt to someone and you can almost bet your afterlife that Cleopatra will spring into their brain faster than the Egyptian embalmer's hook can rip out the contents of a corpse skull. Ouch. Thank goodness people were dead when they did this. Now, as you might have guessed, today's topic is going to have something to do with Cleopatra, more specifically, her death. Now, before you say, "Oh, not another video about Cleopatra," hear me out. Everyone knows Cleopatra killed herself with a venomous snake, but Hollywood portrayals tend to make her last moments look as peaceful and calming as gulping a shot of NyQuil and drifting off to eternal bliss, immaculately attired and not a hair on her wig out of place. Well, my hidden ones, I'm here to tell you that this is not how things went down. Death caused by venom is anything but blissful. I'm just here to set the facts straight, entertain you a little, and ensure that you never think of Queen Cleopatra the same way again. To start, I'm going to give you a bit of background on her first, since I'm guessing it's probably been a long time since you've picked up a history book. You're probably at least somewhat familiar with Cleopatra's story. Most people are. If not, you've probably been hiding under a pyramid. But whether you've been out of school for a while or been hiding under that pyramid, I'm just going to give you this brief refresher course for the purposes of this video. I mean, what's the point of learning about Cleopatra's death if you don't know why she killed herself, right? Hang with me, my hidden ones. It's going to be okay. Cleopatra is the very definition of legendary. She married not one, but two leaders of Rome. The first was Julius Caesar, the second was Mark Antony. She spoke multiple languages, did what she pleased, and ran a country, all without coffee. Maybe it was the beer. They certainly had plenty of that in ancient Egypt, but I'm willing to bet it wasn't Corona. Beverage jokes aside, Cleopatra was not only the queen of Egypt, despite not being of Egyptian descent, but also the queen of badassery in a time when most women in the world were considered little more than baby-making property. Most of us know that Cleopatra, as powerful as she was, began to develop an unquenchable thirst for more than what she already had. Power will do that to you. If you ask me, I would have been content just to lay back on my throne, have my feet massaged, bark out a couple orders, and manage Egypt like a good little queen, thanking the universe for my good fortune just to be a queen. Not our Cleopatra, though. Her ultimate goal was to unite the known world under one banner. And judging by how well Egypt fared during her reign, which was quite well, this may not have been entirely a bad idea, except for one little snag: the Roman Empire. Cleopatra wanted to rule the world, but the Romans just weren't having it. They were running the show, aka the world, and were eager to keep running it until the end of time, or at least until togas fell out of fashion. They wanted to be the only lions in their den of power. But when Cleopatra and her Roman husband Mark Antony demanded to own what Rome had conquered, the Romans did the only thing any other country under threat would do. They declared war on Egypt, and they won. Cleopatra's army, led by Mark Antony, fought hard in the Battle of Actium, a naval battle with hundreds of ships. But Rome was an expert on warfare, which is probably why they ruled the world in the first place. They won the Battle of Actium, forcing Antony's legions back to Egypt, where they promptly deserted him. Thanks, guys. I guess good help is hard to find. It's no wonder the poor man took his own life. I don't advise this, okay? No, we don't want anybody taking their lives here. This poor guy, he's beaten in battle, exiled from his birthplace, betrayed by his own countrymen, and all he's got left to look forward to is the approaching Roman army intent on taking whatever he has left, which was Cleopatra, Egypt, a few kids, and a short sword that must have really hurt when he stabbed himself in the gut with it. This was a man who was once 1/3 the master of Rome and the provinces it ruled. Now he had practically nothing, which was a huge blow to a man of his standing and Cleopatra's. So their doom was sealed when they made Rome their enemy. That was their fatal mistake, literally, the one that cost them both their very privileged lives. Big oops. The lesson we can learn here is be grateful for what you have, because if you try to take more than your share, you might end up with nothing. And nothing is exactly what Cleopatra ended up with. Rome had conquered her, invaded her country, took all her possessions by their right of conquest, and basically reduced her status to little more than a slave. However, rather than submit to Roman rule, she chose to end her life with the help of a venomous reptile. And if you want to know the difference between poisonous and venomous, keep listening, and you'll be able to impress your friends with this tidbit of knowledge. Poison is a man-made substance that can kill you, and venom is an animal-made substance that can kill you. Poison, people. Get it? Now that we're caught up with the events that led up to the suicides of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, it's time to explain how they came about. Mark Antony, believing that Cleopatra had already taken her life, stabbed himself with his hobbit sword. However, upon learning that the queen was alive and barricaded with her servants in her own tomb, he was brought there and died in Cleopatra's arms. I can't even imagine the emotional trauma the queen experienced at that moment. Life as she knew it was about to end, and now the love of her life was dead by his own hand. Wow. And worse events were shortly to follow. She was captured by Caesar Octavian, allowed to perform Antony's funeral rites, but she knew that she would be forced to go to Rome as a sort of living trophy to be publicly humiliated, and who knows what else. So she, instead of suffering through that, she chose to end her life in August of 30 BC. Now, movies and artwork have often portrayed Cleopatra's final moments as something beautiful and peaceful. But what actually happens to the human body once that venom enters the bloodstream? Let's be real here. When you're bitten by a venomous reptile, you are not going to go down quietly. Chapter 1, The Bite. Now, I've held snakes before, and I think they're kind of cool. I once knew a lady in my childhood that owned 12 snakes of various sizes, and holding them was actually kind of relaxing, believe it or not. However, I don't think I'd be very calm if I was holding one that could kill me. I really don't know how Cleopatra got up the nerve to pick up a 10-foot-long Egyptian cobra, also known as an asp, and brace herself for a painful bite. I mean, those things are huge. So, aside from feeling like 2 very large knitting needles had entered her skin, she probably felt miserable. Life as she knew it was over, and now she had actually submitted to being bitten by a snake that most people went out of their way to avoid. She was not, however, uninformed about what would happen to her, since she had experimented with the effects of various poisons on condemned prisoners. She'd learned that the bite of the asp was the least painful way to go. Oh, come on, I don't believe this. But how painless was it? That is why I am here. Chapter 2, Everything Unravels. When a person is bitten by a venomous snake, a whole smorgasbord of interesting, not to mention disgusting, symptoms are sure to follow. Now, if you're the queasy sort who passes out at the very mention of bodily substances, I don't recommend listening to this next bit. Please feel free to skip to the end, watch the credits, and maybe visit my sponsor to get yourself a Hidden History t-shirt. Thank you. We don't know the specific symptoms that the queen experienced, but for the purposes of this video, we'll just imagine that it was likely to be nearly all of them. It's just more fun that way. Following the bite by a big reptile with a bad attitude, along with pain and swelling at the bite site, I like that. Cleopatra likely experienced abdominal pains that probably felt like labor. How fun. Vomiting soon would have followed, which is something we never picture a queen doing. I mean, it's like imagining them doing a fart. Not very regal. No one ever talks about royal farts, more's the pity. But I digress. The cause of the upchucking over the last royal meal was the neurotoxins in the venom. I could just imagine, like, Cleopatra's devoted maidservants holding out golden bowls for her to puke into and trying not to think about the same thing happening to them when it was their turn to get bitten. Because if you remember anything from your high school history class, they chose to die with their queen the same way to keep serving her in the afterlife. You just can't buy loyalty like that. Thanks for catching my puke, but your turn's coming. Along with filling golden vessels with royal vomit, Cleopatra would have also run into trouble at the opposite end of her digestive tract in the form of diarrhea. Yuck. Let's just step back and take a look at her situation from a modern perspective. It's August in Egypt, which means it's insanely hot wherever you are. She sealed herself and her servants in her tomb, and last time I checked, tombs don't have windows, aka ventilation. There's no indoor plumbing. She's surrounded by vessels of vomit and diarrhea. I think it's safe to conclude that the smell must have been beyond bad. Like, you just got accidentally locked up in the family outhouse in summer bad, and she thought Rome was her biggest problem. I suppose the breathing difficulties from the neurotoxins would have been extremely welcome right now. Seriously, at this point, I think I would have just skipped the whole death by snakebite thingy by now if I was one of her maidservants, because things just got even worse from then. Sorry, Your Majesty, but this dagger is looking so much more appealing than that cobra. See you in the afterlife. Bye! We know the queen was feeling blue, but soon her skin started to turn blue by turning funky colors from the necrosis, or cell death, setting in. I can only imagine the mental distress this would have caused her, because she was really proud of that skin, bathing it in milk regularly to keep it soft. It was probably in a state of near perfection when the discoloration began. First, the area around the bite site, and possibly her limbs, slowly began to lose life, normal coloration, and feeling of sensation. Tip: if you don't want to see an extreme case of necrosis, I suggest putting extreme necrosis on your do not Google list. Okay guys, hang with me here. I know this is bad, but it soon became even worse for the poor queen. Aside from all the rest of the horrors she was experiencing, like locked in the outhouse syndrome, internal bleeding soon followed. Oh, this just keeps getting better and better. The hemotoxins in the venom would eventually cause her insides to slowly liquefy. The bloody contents would ooze from her mucous membranes, nose, eyes, unmentionable areas. It was probably something like using Stretch Armstrong as a voodoo doll. Death, the final chapter. We're almost there, my hidden ones. Stay with me. Before Cleopatra's painted eyelids closed for the last time, it was highly likely that those eyes could no longer see, because one of the effects of neurotoxin is blindness. Oh, how fun. There she was, probably laying on a stone slab waiting for death, when the world around her slowly began to fade from sight. The faces of her devoted servants were probably the last thing she ever saw, as they no doubt mopped her perspiring forehead that was also plagued by headache. Now, let's just take another step back. Instead of watching their beloved Cleopatra suffer all these agonies, you would think her servants by now would have just put her out of her misery with a quick slash to the throat or something. But that's not what happened. They stayed by her side, tending to her needs from both ends, waiting for her to die so that they could prepare her for burial and then take their own lives the same way. Wow, that's loyalty. So it was all down to time now. Waiting was the only thing they could do. And before long, the last queen of Egypt was no more. She was 39 years old. I'm 38, so this really hits home with me. I couldn't even imagine dying in a year. So she was buried with Mark Antony as she had requested, and their tomb has never been found. Maybe that's as it should be. So, what was her possible cause of death? Now, for all this suffering, Cleopatra's official cause of death was actually not determined at the time. It could have been anything from a heart attack caused by the release of too much potassium in the bloodstream, respiratory failure, organ failure, or a combination of many things brought on by the toxicity of the venom. No cause of death officially was named at the time. Puncture wounds were found on her arm, but many people debate and speculate over whether they were caused by a snake fangs, or by other sharp implements used to break open the skin to introduce a poisonous ointment or toxin. For the purposes of this video, I must mention that most historians agree that asp venom was used. So, how long did it take Cleopatra to die this horrible death? Death could have occurred almost immediately, or possibly even up to a few hours, but most people die within 30 minutes of being bitten. For her, I hope it was quick. But even that short amount of time must have seemed like an eternity, with the psychological and physiological trauma she went through. She may or may not have experienced all of the above symptoms I mentioned, but it is true that it's highly likely. Anyone who has suffered a snakebite can tell you that even with treatment in the modern age, the experience is anything but elegant and peaceful. So when it's my turn to leave this world, I hope my death will be a lot less traumatic than Cleopatra's. Hopefully yours will be too, my hidden ones. Until next time, stay hidden. This video was sponsored by Winter Moon Designs, linked below, where you will find apparel, gifts, and hidden history merchandise. We hope you will support our channel and make it possible to create even more exciting content for your enjoyment. Thanks for watching!